Hi, my name's Allison. I'm a PhD student at the University of Vermont in environmental science, and I study the ways that people connect with nature.
My name's Christian, and I'm also a PhD student at the University of Vermont, where I study the impacts of humans on other species and also how we can use art to sort of understand our relationships with other species. So this presentation is about a new iteration of a continuing project that we've been working on, exploring how we can use art to address right whale entanglement and how to shift policy to prevent it in the future. So North Atlantic right whales live along the east coast of North America, which is one of the marine environments most used by humans, with shipping and fishing, oil and gas exploration, and all sorts of other things all overlapping in the right whale's habitat. And this is also across two countries, which makes management even more difficult. In this lower picture, we can see a right whale feeding, where they open their mouths and do what is called ram feeding, where they just ram through the water, filtering out copepods as they go. You can imagine having this big open fan at the front of your body as you're moving through the water might make you particularly vulnerable to getting tangled up in things as you're going. So entanglement in human fishing gear is a serious threat to whales. The top left image shows entanglement through the mouth of the whale, where the whale is dragging buoys. The lower left photo shows a whale killed from an entanglement in recent years, and the lower right photo shows a chronic entanglement, which has been on this particular whale for something like 8 years. So these entanglements can range in length from short entanglements where the whale is killed quickly to long-term, years-long entanglements. And we do attempt to cut the ropes off of the whale sometimes, but that is not an ideal management strategy. So entanglement can lead to the death of whales in a number of ways, from chronic injury to starvation, which makes feeding difficult or impossible, and immediate drowning. Many whales with entanglement suffer from serious health declines over the course of the entanglement, from both the injuries that the entanglement causes and the chronic stress that also comes from the entanglement. The injuries that come from entanglement can be incredibly grim. It is also likely, as we found in recent years, that the energy cost of dragging around the line and the stress from the entanglement have contributed to enough energetic costs that the females are no longer able to reproduce, which is possibly a contributing factor in why there have been so few calves in recent years. The reason this species is called the right whale is because it was the right whale to hunt. So for centuries, humans hunted this whale, and until recently, the species had begun to recover. But entanglement in fishing gear is one of the main reasons why this species has not been able to recover. Last year, there were no calves born, and there are only about 415 whales alive today. And recent modeling estimates show that without entanglement, North Atlantic right whales would be on the path to recovery. And that's even if other types of mortalities like ship strikes still occurred. So entanglement mostly occurs in the snow crab and lobster fisheries, when the whales swim into the vertical lines which lead from the surface buoys to the lobster and crab traps which lie on the seafloor. Part of the recent increase in entanglements and the serious injuries that go along with them is that the ropes that have been used in these fisheries have become much stronger in recent years. What remains hopeful about this situation is that unlike many of the human impacts which are contributing to species declines around the world, entanglement has some simple solutions. We can use fisheries closures to prevent fishing in places where the whales are found. There are a number of technologies in development which remove the vertical line from the water, where basically the trap is dropped overboard, and then when the fisher returns, it sends a signal down to the trap, which brings it to the surface, either through this unspooling rope that comes up, or through a little bag that inflates and brings the trap up to the surface. Use of weaker rope may also help with the entanglement issue, but that's less of an ideal situation. But all three of these possible solutions require changes, many of which face resistance, especially from fishers. So we can either change policy, with changing how we're fishing. We can invest a lot of money so that fishers are able to update their traps to these newer versions. Or we could use some form of social or economic pressure, such as seafood ratings. And all three of these methods are being used to some extent. But overall, we don't see the public pressure that we need to make sure we move quickly on these issues before the whales go extinct.
So if we want to change behavior to protect North Atlantic right whales, how can we do that? Unfortunately, research shows that simply providing information about an issue is often not enough to motivate significant behavior change. There is evidence that attachment to a natural place, one's sense of interconnectedness with the rest of nature, and social norms all play significant roles in behavior change. In other words, social and emotional factors are important motivators. Since it's an emotional medium that triggers cognitive experiences that are different from those triggered by information sharing, we think that art may be uniquely positioned to affect conservation behavior. As well-known environmental artist Olafur Eliasson said, art can mitigate the numbing effect created by the glut of information we are faced with today and motivate people to turn thinking into doing. We know that images of entanglement are grim and disturbing, and this might lead people to recoil from thinking about the issue or discussing it with others. So can art be a way to draw people into thinking about entanglement and motivate behavior change? There have been many conservation-oriented, large-scale public art projects, like Todd McGrain's Lost Bird Project, which includes sculptures that serve as memorials for extinct birds around the world. This image is of his great ox sculpture in Iceland. Or you might be familiar with Maya Lin's ongoing artwork called What is Missing, or Olafur Eliasson's Ice Watch. There's also a history of ceremony-type art to engage with and motivate environmental change, such as the River Clyde pageant. But to our knowledge, no research has actually assessed the effect of art in motivating conservation action.
The specific art we want to test in this experiment is a variation of these entangled whale lanterns that I've built and installed in a few places in the Northeast. So these photos are from an event at the New Bedford Whaling Museum during a conference exploring right whales and entanglement. The sculptures are in the form of lanterns, with the skeleton of the whale revealed when the light is illuminated. What I wanted these sculptures to be able to do is to draw people towards them, and then, when you're close and up next to the lantern, the grimness of the entanglement injury becomes clear. There were about 50 whales that were a part of this show, and you can see it was pretty incredible to be able to have them underneath the skeletons of the whales for the event. And that skeleton that's most in the image right there is a right whale that was killed by a Navy ship strike. One of the things that's most important for me about these installations is that people can go and get up and sort of inside and intermingle with the whales. And after these installations, we wanted to know if seeing this installation or being a part of an interactive installation where the participants who come to the event are actually able to wrap the ropes around the whales themselves, if that had an effect on what people wanted to do to protect right whales.
So our goal with this project is to assess whether and how art can motivate conservation behavior as compared with more traditional information sharing like you might see in a poster or presentation or at a museum. This experiment will have 4 basic parts. First, participants will be put in a group to either see or participate in a whale entanglement art action similar to the images that Christian showed earlier but more interactive, or they'll be put in the group to view an informational display about North Atlantic right whale entanglement. Then they'll take a survey assessing their attitudes about North Atlantic right whales and protecting them. This might end up being usable data, but it's not really the actual point of the experiment. It's really a decoy. Then participants will receive $15 as a thank you or incentive for participating and will have the opportunity to donate any portion of that. This is the actual thing we're testing. How much do folks choose to donate depending on which group they were put in at the beginning? Because there's often a gap between what people say they will do and what they actually do when it comes to conservation, we want to directly assess people's actions, and looking at donations is one way to do that. In fact, it's a method that many other experiments have used to assess actual behavior. I want to say a little bit more about how the art action is actually going to happen. So the idea is that the communities will come to the location at sunset. Sunset's important because they're whale lanterns. They just look a lot better in the dark. It's a much more impactful piece. There will be a number of groups. They're given whales and rope, and they'll be led through wrapping ropes around the whales, so actually entangling the whales. And the whales will be placed around the location while people sort of talk and think about the piece. Then there will be a disentanglement ceremony to close the event. And a really important part of this whole process is that community members actually have their hands on the project doing the entanglement and disentanglement and really thinking about their engagement in that while that's happening. Because it's possible that just the engagement with the process is what makes it different from just reading about the whale entanglement via the sort of typical information sharing like the other group will be doing. We're also going to have a group that just views the artwork once it's been assembled, but isn't actually involved in the entanglement process itself.
So here's a little bit of an example of what we're sort of imagining for the entanglement ceremony. Of course, I'd hope to have a outdoor evening sunset demonstration of sort of what it would look like in place, but here's a little bit about how it might look.
So we hope that the results of this project will help us understand the impact of art on behavior, and understanding that has really wide implications for the kinds of events and forms of communication that are used to motivate conservation behavior more broadly. So hopefully this will have an impact on the North Atlantic right whale entanglement issue specifically, but also on conservation issues more generally. Thanks so much for listening. Sorry we couldn't be there with you guys in person today, but if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation, please feel free to contact us. Our information is on this slide. Thanks so much.